yesterday. And joining us now is someone who is part of that meeting, the Republican governor of Maryland, Larry Hogan. Thank you very much for being on the show. I know the state reported yesterday the highest new coronavirus cases ever, highest number. How did the meeting with President-elect Biden go? What are you hopeful will happen in the transition, or at least when his presidency begins, to try and stem the tide of these cases and deaths?
Well, first of all, I think it was a very productive meeting that we had yesterday. I was glad that the president-elect reached out to the National Governors Association. This was the executive committee of the organization, so we're 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats. We had a really good, productive discussion. And we gave, mostly it was the vice president and the president-elect and the vice president-elect asking for the input from the governors who have been on the front lines of this crisis. And we shared with them some of the things that we thought we needed to be on top of, some of the things you've been talking about this morning. One of the things, good news stories as to where we are on the vaccines. I pushed to talk about we've got to get the transition moving so that they can get up to speed from the outgoing administration. We also had a productive meeting with Vice President Pence and the White House Coronavirus Task Force a couple of days ago. And I've been stressing that the two groups need to start talking right away so that we can stay on top of this. We're in the middle of this war against the virus, and we've got to have everybody on the field.
Someone who knows a tad bit about Maryland would be Michael Steele, and he's got the next question. Michael?
Governor, it's so good to see you this morning.
Morning, Michael.
Good to see you, bro. The city of New York is closing schools. Other municipalities and governors around the country are reevaluating the situation in schools. Where are you, given the spiking that we're seeing in our region, the steps you've already taken to reduce occupancy in public spaces? Are schools now back in that rotation of consideration? Are other efforts being considered to sort of stem this apparent increase in COVID-19 at this moment, not just here in Maryland, but elsewhere? Did the governors talked about that?
Well, we've had a lot of conversations between and among governors across the country. Look, this virus is raging out of control in all 50 states. We had been doing relatively well for 3 or 4 months. We were better than 43 other states. Our positivity rate was low. Our transmission rate was low. But, this virus does not recognize state borders. And so now we're having incredible spikes like we haven't seen since March and April. And we're taking aggressive actions, as we did early on in the crisis. Our school systems in Maryland, duly elected local county school boards get to make the final determinations about what happens in their schools. And where we are, for the most part, is in hybrid learning, where some of the kids who need instruction, in-person instruction more, like special needs kids or people that don't have access to the internet, people that really need the hands-on interacting with teachers, they're coming back in a safe way with PPE and distancing and sanitation and just filtration systems and trying to keep them safe. But many of our kids are still schooling remotely, and different counties are making different decisions about that.
Governor Hogan, it's Willie Geist. Good to have you on the show this morning. As I listen to you speak, I'm thinking back to the early days of this public health crisis and the incredible story that your wife actually had to call friends back in South Korea to get testing and to get things moving because you weren't getting any help from anywhere else. You had to improvise and do what you could do for your state. Has it gotten better in terms of federal assistance to you? Right now, we're basically facing a situation like we did in March and April, that level of crisis. Is there better cooperation? Do you have more of what you need this time?
Well, yes. So back in March, there was no real national testing strategy. There were no supplies. Every governor was left to fend for themselves. We couldn't find any of the desperately needed stuff anywhere in America. And so my wife, who was born in South Korea, we reached out to the South Korean embassy. It was 22 days of negotiations back and forth, and we got 500,000 coronavirus tests, which was the backbone of our testing strategy for the past 7 months. But it has improved over that period of time. So it was really terrible at the beginning, and I was one of the loudest critics. But things like, FEMA has really stepped up in getting supplies out to us. The governors pressed to utilize the Defense Production Act for the production of things like swabs and ventilators, and we're now caught up. We do a better job of keeping people alive with some of the therapeutics, and we're doing really well on the vaccine. Operation Warp Speed is a tremendous success at this point. And so it's gotten better, and we still are having ongoing discussions with the Vice President and the Coronavirus Task Force. But my concern right now is that smooth transition to the incoming administration to make sure they're up to speed and that nobody drops the ball on the handoff.
All right, Republican Governor Larry Hogan of Maryland, thank you very much for updating us. Good to have you on the show.